Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zoom meeting number 14. So, as we've been doing, we're going to open with a practice that we will all share together, inviting you to just do this practice. So, we've been working with attention for all these weeks, and we're starting to make a transition from thinking about attention to adding in emotion regulation. So we're going to do a practice in which we practice both attention and emotion regulation. So we're going to do a hack of our nervous system. We're going to do a thing that is going to perhaps bring you a little more into balance so you'll get a chance to see. So we'll start with attention. And you can just notice how you are right now. Notice what's going on with you, maybe checking into how your body feels, how your muscles are. Maybe there's places that are tight. Maybe there's places that are softer. Maybe you notice how your breathing is. Maybe you notice your heart rate. Some people can feel that. And just what is it like in your mind right now with your thoughts and emotions? So sort of the weather in your mind, if you will. So maybe it's clear and sunny. Maybe it's foggy. Maybe there's a storm brewing. So just notice how it is for you. And then let's do together 3 sighs. So we're going to breathe in deeply through our nose, and then we're going to breathe out through the mouth and make a sighing sound. Okay. So when you're ready, you could breathe in through your nose, and then out through your mouth. And so let's try another one, just breathing in. And then. And one more time. And you could check in again. So how is it in your body now? What do you notice in terms of tightness or softness in your muscles? What's the weather in your mind? So do you notice any little change between before and after? So here's the deal. Sometimes 3 doesn't do it. So let's just do 3 more, just for good measure. So breathing in. Trying it again. One more time. And so now checking in. What's it like? Do you notice a shift at this point? So I'm going to ask you if you have noticed anything to type something into the chat for us, something short, something easy for you to type. And I'm going to ask my guest, as is also the tradition on this on these Zoom meetings. So, Amanda, how is it with you right now?
I feel pretty good and relaxed right now, actually.
Okay. Is that different than when we started?
A little.
A
Yes.
little. Okay, so you noticed a little shift.
Yeah.
Cool. I wonder what's up in the audience out there. Any responses? No. They're all too relaxed to even type, right? So, or it got them all agitated and they don't want to type. Who knows? So you could tell us. We'll be happy to read out any responses. Meanwhile, I want to formally introduce my guest, Amanda Blue, who actually has a Master of Public Health from Westchester University, and that's my department.
Go Golden Rams.
Yes. All right. So Amanda is the education director at the David Farber ASPIRE Center, and ASPIRE stands for Advancement of Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Education. So that's at Thomas Jefferson University. She also serves as the executive director of Prevent Suicide PA and is the program director for mental health first aid in Chester County. So you can see that she's deeply committed to helping individuals and families in crisis, which is always at the top of mind in this program, Learning Life Skills Together, as well. And as you can see on our homepage. Now, I'm going to ask Amanda to start us off by talking about where her deep commitment comes from.
Well, thank you. So my story of how I arrived at this place is a little complex and circuitous, so stick with me for a minute. A number of years ago, I suppose it's about a little over 15 now, I was working in graphic design, and I lost my husband to suicide. Excuse me. It was 2008. And 4 years later, in 2012, I lost my 14-year-old son. And that changed the trajectory of my life. I had sort of started to explore some information around mental health and suicide prevention after my husband died, but really not extensively. After I lost my son, I kind of went in all the way and learned a lot myself, read a lot, learned a lot, met a lot of people, and ultimately became trained in teaching some suicide prevention programs, became active on the Chester County Suicide Prevention Task Force, and ultimately chaired that task force for a number of years, which just, everything just sort of built on everything else.
Yeah.
And kind of culminated in where I am now at the ASPIRE Center. And it's just given me an opportunity to expand the impact that I feel like I personally and we collectively can have through education, which is kind of the compelling thing that I feel is the educating of others.
Yeah, so education, prevention, sort of related but not entirely the same thing.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is, you're sort of looking at individuals in crisis, and part of that is certainly kids in crisis. And that's actually how Learning Life Skills Together came into being, was how can we bring in a preventive piece in the middle of a crisis, right? Just sort of, statistically a crisis. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you see learning life skills together relating to what you do.
Well, I think that the point that you made about prevention and education not being the same thing is a good one, because it isn't. There's a huge amount of education to do. There's a huge amount of prevention work that can be done, but I think they really inform each other largely. A lot of simply educating people creates prevention, right? So we say in the task force a lot that every act of kindness is potentially an act of suicide prevention. We really don't know how we're impacting people, and simple kindness can alter someone's path in ways that we don't always predict.
Yeah.
So I love the learning life skills together, because I think that often upstream solutions like what you're working with here, where you're taking the opportunity to look back, like let's start earlier and prevent from a much earlier age than put out the fire that exists. Yeah. And that is also at the core of education. The more people know and understand, the more that it just naturally creates a preventive environment, right? We build connections. We learn through understanding. And once we understand things, we understand how we can prevent things. Yeah. So I think it's an amazing program, actually.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your programs entail, because
which one?
There is a plethora, I believe the term is.
Well,
a bunch.
So I'll start at the Aspire Center and work out from there. The David Farber ASPIRE Center was initiated with a gift from the Farber family, who sustained a loss. An adult, the Vicky and Jack Farber, who were the benefactors, lost their adult son to suicide, and gave a gift of $2.5 million to Jefferson to open the David Farber ASPIRE Center. It is, what is unique about it is comprehensive in that it includes a clinical environment that specializes and focuses solely on suicide and has a family focus. So our clinical department doesn't just see an individual struggling with suicide. It treats the family. Yeah. That's kind of a foundation of our clinic and part of the important mission of the David Farber ASPIRE Center.
Yeah, so that's another place where we really come together here,
right.
Is that it's everybody.
Right. Yeah. And then the rest of the sort of mission of the ASPIRE Center is that research and education kind of go hand in hand with the clinical setting. So we all, as the three sort of pillars of the center, are able to collaborate and work together both in the ways that we can distribute information and share information, learn the research part of what we do, and can inform the clinical part of what we do, which can inform the educational part of what we do. So that's the beauty of the ASPIRE Center, really, and the uniqueness of it.
Yeah. So this sounds like it's a resource that needs to be well known in the community. Is it? How
We're getting
is it
there.
Doing? Okay.
We're getting there. We had what we call a soft opening, I guess, in October of 22, kind of a ribbon cutting, but at the time I think there were 5 or 6 people there. More formally, we opened in 23, where we now have a staff of about 18 people. So, wow. Yeah, it's expanded pretty significantly. We're still building out departments, research. My area in education is currently just myself and an education coordinator, which is good for what we're doing. I'm going to try to build an empire, though.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
So I think, if your program is super successful, you could put us out of business, but I'm not too worried about that. But I think that where the connection comes is that families that try to make the connections, try to help individuals within the family, and are less successful, and find themselves in a circumstance where they need more help.
Yeah.
That's
this
where
is a place to turn.
This is a place to go.
Yeah.
We are in Philadelphia. I would say that we serve the Philadelphia community mostly, but we have telehealth. We have consultations with our clinical director does a lot of work. 988. The 988 call centers will refer to our clinic for consultation and for help. So,
okay. So you're tied in with that piece, which is really important for us because we're emphasizing the preventive, but we want to make sure that families with kids in crisis can know where to go and what to do.
Right.
So maybe you could talk about your perspective on 988. We've had a couple people come in and talk about, sort of their ideas about it, but how, so you're right there in the clinical part of it, and so what's it like for you, and how do you see it?
Well, I think it's absolutely a welcome addition to crisis response. I think for a number of years we have needed a response that was behavioral health oriented and not left mental health and behavioral health crises to be responded to by law enforcement. And we've all seen that play out in ways that weren't so productive. So I think it's tremendous. I think the really interesting fact about 988 is that, and I don't know the numbers, they're working on, they're still collecting a lot of data right now, and that is part of one of the research teams. We have a 5-person team at the ASPIRE Center that's working on implementation and expansion of 988 within the state of Pennsylvania. We have 12 call centers here. So they're collecting a lot of data right now.
This is only year 2 of 988.
Right.
Even. So, sort of everybody's growing up together here.
The amazing part is better than 90% of the calls that go into 988 are resolved on the call.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's really critical for people to understand.
Yes.
Both because the training of the crisis counselors that are answering the call, and because I think that when 988 came into being, and it did essentially just pick up where the 800 talk line left off. In fact, if you dial the 800 talk line, you will still get through to essentially the same people that are 988. But the promotion of and development of 988, I think, has made more people feel more comfortable with the idea of phoning a crisis or texting. You can text 988. You can chat from your computer with 988. So I think more people are calling about themselves, about friends that need help. But it isn't the perception that most people have that the person that's calling is literally standing on a cliff. It isn't quite that, because more people are recognizing it as a resource and taking advantage of the help that it offers before they are standing on the cliff. Right? Yeah. So you can call 988 or text 988 for yourself or for somebody else. You could be trying to help someone and call 988 yourself to get help to help them. And with the expansion of 988 in Pennsylvania, the goal is to have all inter-Pennsylvania calls answered within the state of Pennsylvania, so you have the access most quickly to the best and most local resources. So it's doing great things, really.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. In addition, so you mentioned the mental health first aid.
Right.
I've been facilitating mental health first aid in the county since 2019, teaching it since 2016. And mental health first aid is another preventative, if you will, program. That's probably loosely defined. But it is increasing mental health literacy. It's helping people understand about mental health, about what it means to be mentally healthy, but also to recognize signs and symptoms, et cetera, in others, in friends, colleagues, coworkers, family, et cetera, and hopefully empowering them to intervene when they're concerned about somebody and not feel like they don't know what to say, so they don't.
Exactly. Avoiding. Remember, this is one of our 2 things that we teach all the time, avoiding. Yeah. So, it is a wonderful program. I have taken it. at the Center for Contemplative Studies, the students who work there, I ask them all to take it, because we all have a piece in this.
Yeah, and it's very comprehensive. It's a full day, as you know, but it really, I think it really provides a strong foundation for people to understand, feel like they have enough information. I think most people are afraid to intervene when they're concerned about somebody, more because they're not sure what to do or how to do it than because they just don't want to. I think a lot of people absolutely would be helpful, but they fear that they don't have the skills or the knowledge. Right. And so we help to inspire people to recognize that we all have the power to prevent suicide, every one of us. And you don't have to be a therapist or clinician, or you don't have to have that. You just have to have some pretty basic skills.
Yeah. So mental health first aid as a resource for people who are participating in learning life skills together. How do you see that? I mean, I definitely understand that our carers, sort of the larger public who care about our kids, coaches, clergy, all those kinds of folks. That seems a no-brainer.
Even parents, because that
was my question.
There is a youth mental health first aid, and so there are kind of companion programs. Both of them provide a foundation in mental health, so you get some general information about the most prevalent disorders in mental health, like depression, anxiety, the things we hear so much about.
Right.
But the difference is the adult program versus the youth program. They are designed to help you have a conversation with someone. So in the case of the adult program, the conversation is more developed for an adult. So if you had a concern about a coworker or family member that was an adult, this is how you might have the conversation with them. You can imagine that you wouldn't have the same type of conversation with somebody that was 12 years old.
Right.
So both recognizing concerning signs and addressing them is different when you're trying to talk to a 12-year-old. And your role in that 12-year-old's life matters, right? A parent can speak to their 12-year-old son differently than a coach or a bus driver or a cafeteria lady, right? But all of them having the skills does the same thing. Helps them feel empowered to kind of step in and say, hey, are you okay? These are some things I've noticed that are going on here, and maybe we can have a minute to have a conversation. Yeah. But I think people just have to feel empowered to do that and take that step.
So it's a little bit of investment. It's an 8-hour day. It's pretty much a full
day, right? The adult program is 8 and the youth is 6, but either way, it's a full day.
Yeah, it's a lot to absorb. It's a lot to process.
But it's offered for free all over in the county.
Yeah.
Every month there are classes in Chester County.
So how would somebody find out where those classes were?
There are 2 different websites, actually. If you're familiar with the county website, the Chester County MHIDD, chesco.org, the mental health, and then there's a link for trainings on that page, and the trainings are listed there. They're also listed at the Chester County Suicide Prevention Task Force, because that's kind of the organization that I work through in doing this. So Chester County Suicide Prevention, .com also has a schedule of trainings.
Of
so you can get the links to sign up for those trainings there.
I mean, it sounds like something that could be useful to folks.
Yeah, I think that, it kind of fits in with the general understanding of I think it would help to enhance the information that you're working with people to engage with their kids. And I think having this knowledge, it just is one more kind of tool in the toolkit, if you will, of understanding.
So let's, if we can, reflect a little bit from our 2 perspectives on what's happening in learning life skills together. Because learning life skills together, if you back it all the way up, comes from the kinds of therapeutic interventions that would be given to kids who are suicidal or self-harming, right?
Right.
So our 4 skills are kind of the things that those kids are getting through therapy because they didn't have them prior. So that's kind of the whole way that we got to this program was how can we prevent by saying what do our kids need? What skills do they need to have within themselves?
Right.
Right.
And the therapeutic foundation that you use in that program is, in fact, the therapeutic foundation that we offer at the Aspire Center as part of the therapeutic interventions that we do at the Aspire Center. Right. And we have skills training in that as well.
Right. Yeah.
Weekly meetings of skills trainings at the Aspire Center.
And you're doing that, and the parents and the kids are getting that at the Aspire Center. So, I mean, it's the parallels are really kind of, obvious in one way and kind of cool to see, as you were saying, upstream and downstream. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's nice to think that these are skills that if you start in the beginning with them, they carry you through. So ideally, they're still going to apply at every stage. So it's the same message, right? It's all
I
the same
use
messaging,
them.
Right? Yep. Yeah, we have lots of people. We have what we call our DBT skills group at the Aspire Center, and we have weekly meetings of people in that group that are in varying stages of working through their suicidal ideation, whatever their particular state is in the moment, but it's their companions and families all learning it together, which very much like what you're suggesting.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I reflect on constantly, and we're going to be rolling out the module on emotion regulation soon, is how when we do these things together, or when one family member is able to work with their emotions, maybe better than the next person down in the family, that influences how things are. You can really help people just by being able to help yourself.
Right.
And I think to understand that it's deeply, deeply rooted in our, not just in our relationships, but in our looking at each other's faces, looking in each other's eyes, that has a huge impact.
Sure.
I mean, as you were saying about one act of kindness, one face that's relaxed in the family can change things.
Right. It's funny. My daughter, who is almost 30 years old now, when she was a toddler, I remember reading one time in a book, parenting book, about how tantrums, the 2-year-old tantrums, and how to manage those situations. And basically the language that they used around that was borrowing calm. So your ability to remain calm allows the toddler to borrow the calm from you. And I think anybody out there who's a parent has seen how that works.
It does work.
And it's probably one of the easiest and most apparent examples of exactly what you're talking about. How we are able to manage our own emotions will absolutely impact everyone around us. And as children watching adults manage that, it's, you learn to adapt right into that environment, maintain that level of calm, and kind of fit right into that, and almost feel awkward if you don't, right? Like at a certain point, it's like, well, wait, this isn't how people behave. Hopefully.
Yes. Well, this is it, is that the other thing that we talk about all the time is you have to do these things over and over and over again, because it's practice that makes it happen. You can know all the stuff in the world about how your emotions work and how your mind works and how your body works. But if you haven't practiced it, you don't have it when the rubber meets the road.
That's right. Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
yeah. So it's like the relaxing sighs that we did at the beginning. I mean, that's something that's always available. So if you're not that calm, in that calm center in the storm in the household, you can be it. You can get there.
Yep. It's one of the when I teach mental health first aid, a lot of what we talk about is how to have a conversation with someone that might be in crisis, and people are very anxious about that. And it is one of the pieces of that equation is in fact exactly that your ability to sort of maintain your composure regardless of how you're feeling inside. Because if you have just asked someone you care about if they're considering suicide, if they're really thinking of suicide, you're probably not going to be calm, at least inside.
Yeah, inside.
But your ability to maintain your composure, I think in mental health first aid they say think of a duck on a pond. On the surface, they look very calm, but they're paddling real hard underneath. And it is sort of that idea, and that is a big part of it, is teaching people how to recognize that it is your composure that is going to help someone feel like they can open up to you and develop trust that you have their best interest at heart, et cetera. And all of that is kind of built around that conversation.
Yeah. So there it is in a crisis situation, and we're sort of saying, well, why don't we do this a lot in situations that aren't a crisis? In fact, why don't we do it in situations that are kind of fun?
Right.
Right? I mean, so that's actually the whole structure of what we're doing. We're saying, let's take these 4 skills, and I should name them at this point, I guess. So, One more time. So it's paying attention is the first one and the absolute foundation. If you can get this one down, the other ones are just going to fall into place on top of it, right? So paying attention to what's happening around you right now in this moment, and paying attention to how you feel inside. What's around you doing inside you? Right? What's your response to it? So then you have a chance, right? You're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm really anxious. I'm really sad, whatever. Now we can do the next one, which is working with that emotion. So how might we come a little more into balance? And so we're sort of calling that one balance, right? So, wow, now I can do that. Now I can balance myself out. So that's awesome. And we do have lives that are, sort of like waves. Sometimes things are really groovy, and sometimes they're
not
cascading down, So the question then becomes, how do I get through that trough time back onto the wave, right? So that's another set of skills that we will be putting out there. But when you have the first 2 pieces, you have a real running start into being able to get through that tough time.
Right.
And finally, and I think every parent sees this one really easily, it's being able to communicate how you feel and what's going on with you to someone else, clearly and effectively. And so we're talking about being able to do this with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, as well as, kids who have big vocabularies and can actually describe these things. So it's really, it builds, and it builds over time, and it builds over sort of the growing of the child, the development of the child. And the parents are the only ones who are there for all of that.
Right.
That's why they're so important. That's why they're sort of the centerpiece of learning life skills together.
And I can think of, I mean, in my own life, I'm sure in yours as well, so many adults need so many of these reminders anyway, right?
Yes.
With or without children around, I think I've often said to my daughter that it is, in fact, the getting through the tough times that gives you the confidence to get through the next tough time, right? Like you get through it once, and then you realize, okay, I got this. It's the old saw, you've survived 100% of your bad days, right?
Yeah.
And the whole kind of next step of speaking about your feelings and naming them, so to speak, actually addressing them other than some intellectual way.
Yes.
I think is another thing that a lot of adults are just not that good at.
It's hard.
It's
really
hard.
is. It's hard to notice what's happening in you. That's why we're spending so much time talking about the attention part.
Right.
People don't they tune into their mind. They think that this is stuff that you have to know. And an awful lot of how we work as beings,
Yes.
as creatures, is how we feel.
Right. I read that somewhere once, and I actually wrote it down. I have it hanging somewhere, I think, in my office, that says we are actually feeling beings who think, not thinking beings who feel.
Yeah. You got it.
The feeling comes first. Yeah,
It does.
and that is something we all lose sight of, I think, sometimes because we're just programmed to be responding intellectually all the time.
We don't see a bear coming towards us and say, "Oh, I'm afraid, let me run." We run, and then we realize, I'm really scared.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's William James, but there it is. I mean, an American genius for sure, and just identifying that and calling that out for us. But it is how we work.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get so conditioned after so many years that it just fades away. The ability sort of fades away.
Yeah.
I think it's good, maybe as a parent, you recognize more of the emotions in your kids. Like you start to recognize what they look like.
You can see them.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and then it's so important again. So this is another thing that I really think bears repeating and repeating and repeating, is that if you can gift your child the names of those emotions, and the more of them you can give, sort of the easier it is for them to, one, tell you what's going on, and two, to respond to the meaning of that word. So it's like, if all you have is mad, you're going to be mad, right?
Right.
If you've got irked, I'm feeling a little irked. That has a whole different sound to it, and I mean it has less volume than I'm mad.
Doesn't relate to anger necessarily at all.
It doesn't relate. It doesn't connect in that way. So it really helps in managing emotions just from that. So again,
words matter. I say it every day.
Yeah. Yep. They really do. So that's our program, is those 4 skills, which come right out of, as you say, DBT, which is really the preferred therapy at this point for kids in crisis. They have those skills already. That's the upstream. Let's not build the hospital at the bottom of the cliff. Let's build it up there.
Yeah.
So the other piece that we're doing, and that I sort of joked about, is that we're saying, well, why not do these things while we're having fun, or while we're doing something that's pleasurable? And as long as it's going to be pleasurable, why don't we make it something that is actually good for our mental health? And so that's the other part of the program here, is we're saying, okay, take your child for a walk 3 times a week. you'll get a chance to do all these things because there's going to be a day where it's like, I don't want to go. Oh, you're going.
Let's talk about resilience now.
Yes. So this is exactly it. Do you have a comment about that one?
Well, honestly, I'll be honest. I've had dogs my whole life, and in fact, in a former life, worked as a veterinary technician. But I've been engaged in different things with dogs along the way. Agility, competitions, those sorts of things. Dog training, essentially.
Yeah.
And I had most of that before I had children. And so what I discovered early on as a parent is how much parenting is like dog training. And because it's about consistency. I mean, dogs are like children in the way that they learn. They don't learn if you aren't consistent. And I don't mean to compare dogs to children, but the act of raising a puppy and raising a child, there are a lot of similarities. Consistency is a big one. And one of the other things that when you learn to train your dog that they will teach you is it doesn't have to be a scheduled lesson. Have fun. Find ways when you're on the walk with your dog to take a treat and teach them how you can get their attention while you're on the walk. Everybody's out having a good time, but they're learning. They don't really see it as learning.
Yeah.
So I'm laughing because I'm comparing dog training to parenting, but there are some funny same kinds of ideas about that. And I agree that making it fun makes people feel like doing it and not have it feel like one more thing on your to-do list. I mean, that's what we really try to emphasize is we're not talking about let's go hike the Appalachian Trail. Right.
We're talking about let's walk around the neighborhood for a 10-minute loop 3 times a week together and see what comes out of this.
Right.
See what those opportunities that you're talking about are, to have a little fun and to learn some of these skills. And the other thing is that you're talking about consistency, which is one way of saying it. And I want to say repetition, It's like, again, we don't learn it just up here in our mind. We learn it down here in our body in the way that we respond to things.
Right.
And that's the one that counts because we lose a lot of the stuff that's upstairs when we're under pressure.
True.
Right? Everybody has experienced that. Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When we talked about this before, I mentioned vacations, and I loved the point that you made. I was talking about the fact that I learned when my kids were young that being on vacation with them became so meaningful, not because you were in an exotic location, but because when you get away from your house and the chores and the things that you associate with being at home, you focus on each other. You spend much more undivided attention time with your kids when you're on vacation. And I know for my kids, they loved vacation. I don't think they could have articulated that was quite the reason. But in retrospect, when you discuss those things with them, those are the things that evolve out of those conversations. Remember when we did this? Yeah. And a lot of what they're talking about is something you could have done anywhere. It's just that you did it together wherever you were. And it's something that probably wouldn't have happened had you been at home. Yep. And so this idea of thinking of a 10-minute walk around the block or around a park being a little mini vacation feels like a more fun thing to do, something you can actually fit into your day, not like, I have to block out now 3 hours of time to focus on my kid.
We're going to have to drive to the park, and we're going to have to do this.
Right.
Yeah,
sit down across the table from each other and really, have a meaningful and deep conversation, which makes everybody uncomfortable. And
Indeed.
Instead, you can walk where the other thing that I always found when my kids were younger, walking or driving in the car were opportunities where you could have conversations where you're not necessarily looking each other in the eye. Mm-hmm. And that makes everybody a little more comfortable.
Yeah, we walk side by side. Right. We don't walk one of us backwards.
Right.
It's not ballroom dancing, right? Yeah.
So those are nice little vacation moments.
Yeah. So the next thing that we ask people to do is sort of to have experiences of beauty and awe together. So this is another, maybe it's a reason to get outside. Maybe it is a reason to drive to the park that time, or do something like that. But at the same time, you could just get out a picture book. You take a stack out from the library and you just, open it up and look at some of the pictures together. You don't even have to read the book. This is something that I got from a conversation with Mary Cronin, who has been helping us at the Brandywine Museum. And so, you can look at the picture and see what the story of that picture is and what's happening in there. You can make up your own stories.
Right.
And you can really enjoy the picture for itself. Look at those colors. Look at the way they fit together, or don't. And what does that do? You can go as deeply as you want in 10 minutes.
Sure.
Or 5 minutes.
Right.
Again, you can do these things easily, opening up those channels. Well, how does that make you feel? That's kind of that makes me feel kind of queasy, that picture. What do you think?
Right.
How do you feel? Where do you feel that? Because my stomach is going ooh, I'm not sure.
We're looking off a cliff and my stomach is feeling a little anxious.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about these things and we can use the language and, really help build that vocabulary.
And also delve into something that a child might have an interest in.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Books of underwater images or something if they love underwater creatures and things that are particularly interesting.
When you go to the library, let them take them out. You can get 20 or so,
right?
In the children's room usually. So, which is really kind of fun because you feel kind of rich. Walk out with a stack this big. Hey, man, I got books for the week here. So.
Yeah, all good skills.
Yeah. So we do that. Then we say, well, let's take this another step and say, what happens when we make things together? And that can be anything. It could be that we sing a song together in the car on the way to school. We're making something. We're really working on it, or we're making dinner together, or we decide that we're going to formally draw a picture, or play the guitar, or learn the guitar, whatever that might be, right? So all of these are opportunities to explore those skills again. My wife once tried to teach me how to knit. I could go from calm to rage in 3 minutes flat doing that.
I had the same experience with knitting.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's just sort of, it's at the front of my mind.
On those needles, you can't possibly move it.
And you just want to throw it across the room. Mm-hmm. And so there you get a chance to work with, even tolerating distress. No, I got to take this off and cast on again and start over. So making being important in that way. And I don't know how these are striking you from your perspective, because I'll give you the final one, and then maybe I'll just wind you up and let you go and talk about it. But the last one is belonging. And so finding a group that you fit into, where you can contribute. It's like there's lots of easy belongings. You can join all kinds of things. You can join clubs. You can subscribe to 14 things in 4 minutes on the internet.
Right.
That's not belonging. That's not what we're what we're talking about. We're saying, I'm making a commitment to these other people to do this thing that we do.
Yeah, I think probably when you start talking about young people, older than our original conversation, but like maybe middle school aged kids, I think
really important age.
Just as they're kind of entering that period of time in their life, I don't think there are too many things that are actually more important than that. And I mean, I think we know that about kids, but we see that and know it to be true of adults. And one of the things I refer to a lot in Mental Health First Aid is the book, The Blue Zones, that was written by Dan Buettner a number of years ago. But one of the most important critical threads that existed in all of those communities of centenarians across the globe was connection.
Yeah.
And that could have been, and in each case was, in fact, derived in a variety of different ways, through faith-based organizations, through family, in the European countries where the elders
the extended
stay
family.
On with the family and take care of the younger, the next generation. Those kind of meaningful connections that give people a reason to get out of bed in the morning. But we know that our Surgeon General wrote the report, right, about loneliness and the importance of connection. So we know that that's a critical factor, and I think in young kids, it's one of the first red flags, if you will, when we see kids starting to withdraw or isolate.
Yeah,
I mean, it's true of adults too. It's just sometimes it's harder to spot with adults.
It is harder to see.
But in young people, it is a really concerning feature because there aren't. We have some introverted adults that might say, well, I'm choosing this. Most kids aren't choosing that.
Yeah.
So I think the belonging part is a really big piece.
And so how, what are the things that are available, within your community is the big question for your kids. Where can they go to make that connection? And, sports is certainly an answer for some kids. And it's,
Music.
It's harder to find the other things. Music
and sports, I think, are the easiest things to find.
Yeah, the most obvious in our culture.
Through schools and community.
Yet there are so many other things that are. I was talking with a librarian the other day, and she said, "Well, I would like to talk to you at that hour, but I can't because we have our chess club."
Yeah.
And so that's not something that pops immediately into the front of your mind. Oh, okay. Yes, let's find the chess club that's meeting, 2 blocks away, but it's there.
And especially for younger people, I think, unless you come from a family where, chess was important. I don't think most people
it's
are
not going to come up.
Kids aren't exposed to it as much.
Yeah,
but I think that
all
those
kinds of things.
There are opportunities out there. There are art associations where kids can do art camps, and I mean, art was important to me. But and I know in fact, going back to your picture book example, my husband became an artist largely from looking at pictures of artwork and being fascinated by impressionist paintings that inspired him to want to be a painter and learn how to do that. And that literally came from looking at picture books.
Yeah. So these are the pieces of the puzzle, not just of the puzzle of our program, but the puzzle of a life that might be well lived. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're after. And all of that, living a life that you choose and have a little bit of ability to move around in and to have some sense of agency is the phrase that I was using, but I'm not sure everybody understands exactly what I mean by that. That you can do things in your life
Intentionally.
You can choose. That's
Yes.
it. You can choose to do things
Yes.
in your life and make that happen. I think is so important and so much of kind of what you're really thinking about in terms of the preventive part and maybe even the educative part.
A lot of the education part, I think. I think so much of it, because it's really at the core of what we're both talking about, right? By educating people about these things, making them aware, simply making them aware, then they get to choose that. They get to make those choices about that whole idea of developing a sense of attention about myself, about my life, is something I can choose. I can't choose it if I don't understand it or know about it. I've never heard about it. And
Right.
so it's kind of at the core of what we're always doing. And that's why I say it's like education, prevention, there's a hand-in-hand thing there. And it's just creating a general sense of awareness about all of these things and allowing people to make those choices, to recognize that they have a choice. You can choose these things. You can choose to live intentionally. You can take yourself off the autopilot and live intentionally.
That's it. That's a word of wisdom. And so usually I prompt our guests to give us a word of wisdom, and you gave us one. I'm learning to call those watchwords too. So it's like, how do you live your life? By a watchword, not a bucket list, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're much more likely to be able to finagle your way through everything that life throws at you if you're thinking that way. So, Amanda, this was terrific.
Yeah, great to be
I'm so
with you.
glad we had this conversation. And I want to say to everyone out there that we're going to put your information, we're going to reinforce our 988, we're going to put the Aspire contact up there.
Excellent.
And actually anything else you'd like us to post, we would be happy to do that.
Great.
So consider that and
right.
let us know, and folks can look when we post this to Spotify, etc. There will be links in there as well as on our website.
That's excellent.
So.
And I hope that that you are able to push this out and change the path for a lot of people. I feel confident that this program has the capacity to do that.
Wonderful.
Like to stop talking about the youth mental health crisis.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Again, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.